And you were like, can we ask Masket if he has like an expert on oligarchies?
Oh,
and
right.
I was like, hey, Seth, do you have an expert on oligarchies? He goes, yes, I have the guy. And yeah, he's the guy. And he's real smart. And it's, all this is very bad.
Yeah. All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's cold outside still. It's time for the Get More Smarter podcast. This one here, episode 223. I'm Jason Bain.
I'm Ian Silveri. This week on the Get More Smarter podcast, as the Trump regime enters its first week and begins to lay the groundwork for the worst shit imaginable, Colorado's Democratic leaders ready themselves for the fight while Colorado's Republicans write letters of support. We check in with our 7th and 8th favorite members of Congress from Colorado who are quickly getting tied for 8th place, and our 100th favorite, Colorado State Legislator, does something predictable yet insane. But first, he studies oligarchies, kleptocracies, and other malformed governments, and he's here to help us wrap our heads around what the next 4 years could really bring as the tech oligarchy and the federal government collapse into one supervillianesque entity. Professor Thomas Pepinsky from Cornell University joins us to talk about the greatest grift of all time happening right in front of our eyes. Take a listen. It is now my great pleasure to introduce our guest today, Professor Tom Pepinsky, who is the Walter F. Lefebvre Professor of Government and Public Policy at Cornell University and a non-resident senior fellow at the Foreign Policy Program at the Brookings Institution. Professor Pepinsky studies the interaction of political and economic systems around the world and is an expert on oligarchies, kleptocracies, and kakistocracies, 3 terms we'll define later. He was recommended to us by professor of the show, Seth Masket, and we're interviewing him in the first week of the second Trump administration for no particular reason. Tom Pepinsky, welcome to the Get More Smarter podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to see you, Ian.
You too, man. So we're really excited to talk to you today, in part because of how Donald Trump seemingly won the 2024 presidential election and how the country's technology oligarchs have really dropped the act, removed all pretense, and how specifically Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Jeff Bezos were front and center during his indoor inauguration event earlier this week. Jason, I think you have the first question.
Let's just get right to it. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being we're being ruled by the child of Vladimir Putin and Mussolini, how screwed are we?
I mean, I don't want to get apocalyptic here, but the world's most powerful, wealthy man did a Nazi salute twice at the inauguration party, and the Prime Minister of Israel is like, I don't know, like, let's take it easy on the guy. I mean, things are bad. This is
just hailing a cab, you know?
Yeah.
God, it's really, really, really bleak. I mean, we'll get into plenty of current events, but before we do, let's just start by hearing about what you've studied historically or in other countries that might prepare us for what's about to happen in the USA. The question, you've studied oligarchic systems across history and geography. What are the key indicators that signal a democracy shift toward oligarchic control, and are we on the path here?
I think we are clearly on the path here right now. When I think about oligarchy, I think about it in the kind of nerdy political science technical definition of like rule by a few. But there's another way to think about oligarchy, which comes from a political scientist named Jeff Winters, which is oligarchs are people who defend their wealth using political means. And, you know, at some level, like everybody's an oligarch if you want lower taxes. But what he means by this is oligarchs are people who are like, their power comes from the fact that they have enormous amounts of wealth. And oligarchy for him is like what happens when politics is about defending wealth by extremely wealthy people. So my background in cutting into this is studying the late era of Indonesia's New Order regime, which collapsed during an economic crisis in 1998. And during the 30 years prior to that economic collapse, it was ruled by a single man. This guy was named Suharto. He was a general first, then he became a president. And he was by far the most powerful person in Indonesia, and later on became one of the wealthiest people in Indonesia. Forbes once ranked him in the early 2000s as having stolen more money from his country than any other person had in the history of the world. And so
quite a designation. Yeah, right.
He didn't have AI though. Like this was like in the coal-fired oligarchy, not the
not
nuclear
the hip new tech oligarchy. Yeah.
Listen, he was an extremely corrupt person. He was also presided over extreme amounts of violence, like the conditions through which he came to power involved a genocide, a politicide, the extermination of all communists within Indonesia. So when I think about the Trump administration that we're getting here, I cannot help but think about the parallels, right? This focus on providing order instead of law, this focus on promising people development, and a fairly explicit bargain is, I will give you development, I will give you progress, I will give you a sense of hope, and in exchange, I'm going to steal as much as possible from you. And, one of the things which is very hard to figure out, or hard to realize, is that Suharto is long gone, but he's still pretty popular in Indonesia. In fact, his former son-in-law was just elected president.
So he's remembered fondly, even though he stole everything that wasn't nailed down, and this is not in dispute?
Yes, in fact, he's still known to many Indonesians as the father of development rather than the father of kleptocracy. In the early 2000s, there was something called SARS Indonesia style. SARS is an abbreviation, so it stands for severe acute respiratory syndrome or something like that.
And COVID is a version of SARS, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. The Indonesians, SARS stands for Syndrome Aku Rindu Suharto, which means the I Miss Suharto syndrome. So there's like a real issue in Indonesia in politics today of this very split memory that people have of him when they think about the concrete things that he did in terms of expanding school access, expanding education access, and expanding Indonesia's prominence, ending hyperinflation. He really did do those things. When they think about the way that he just monopolized politics and murdered students who opposed him, and maybe 1 million communists or suspected communists along the way, people tend to remember him a little bit less well, but he's a contentious figure, and he's not universally reviled. I mean, this is not a situation like Hitler, in which most contemporary Germans want nothing to do with the guy.
No, Hitler's coming back, too.
But is this like a trade-off kind of thing where people say, yeah, he robbed us blind, but we built bridges?
Yes, that's exactly what it is. I think if you want to feel optimistic as an American right now, I see no evidence that Donald Trump, our current president, has any of the smarts or mental capacity to engineer the sort of social and economic transformation that Indonesia has experienced under Suharto. This was a time for Indonesia of great progress. It really did, in terms of material development, in terms of many indicators that you want to think about, sanitation, health, maternal health, family planning, all that stuff is still with us in Indonesia, and it's been quite successful. And it's complicated because he was also a thirsty tyrant. But he did do good things. I don't see any evidence, at least from my perspective, that Trump and the people he surrounded himself with have any interest in doing any of those things, much less the capability of doing them.
One of the things I wanted to ask you about is, based on this article from Axios over the last couple of days, Trump's $500 million post-election windfall, it details in part that CEOs and big special interests are just coming down to Mar-a-Lago with literal bags of cash. Apparently, the crypto guys are just blowing it out. That's a direct quote from a Trump advisor. It used to be that $1 million was a big number, like what Bezos and Zuckerberg wrote to Trump at Mar-a-Lago when they went to bend the knee. Directly. Well, they're giving it to slush funds that Trump almost certainly controls, like a library that may or may not get built, thousands of unread copies of The Art of the Deal, whatever. I guess my question is, have we ever seen anything like this, or is this just kind of like a totally naked version of payola that we've never seen before in American presidential history? So, I'm not an expert in the worst parts of the 19th century, and I suspect things got really bad back then. Like adjusting for purchasing power parity, I think the Gilded Age was bad. I don't know of any story of people coming down to the president's golf course in Florida with bags full of money and then crypto ledgers full of pretend money and just dumping it in front of him and saying, "Here's this big bribe. It's a bribe." Right.
And he's like, "Thanks for the bribe. I promise to build a library," which is in the history of Donald Trump, he has never built a single thing that he said he was going to build. And the stuff that he built,
let alone read a book.
So I'm going to build a library actually is a very funny, the problem with Trump is he actually is very funny. And I think we have to acknowledge that. That is funny. He's saying, "I'm gonna build a library with it." That's
objectively hilarious, but it's very bleak.
Yeah, but I've never seen anything like it, and I don't remember who made this point, but I saw it on the internet. Like most things, So, like, what is? Oh, I think it was Don Moynihan from the University of Michigan said, "I've never seen a more quickly evaporating norm than the norm that you shouldn't steal things in public. That you're supposed to say, I don't have a conflict of interest, like even if you do, and that's no longer even plausibly true. Like Sam Altman, like on the internet's yesterday saying, actually, maybe he is a genius." In exchange for giving him, getting some contract to do pretend AI, whatever they're going to do to all of our bank accounts. I don't know what they're going to do, but it seems pretty much made up and for wealthy people.
What about this idea or this thing we're seeing where Trump is selling cologne and, well, he was selling shoes and now there's some sort of meme coin that they're selling. Is this something that's common in other forms of kleptocracies, or is Trump doing something new by getting people to buy stuff even though he's president?
I'm sure that if I thought hard enough, I could probably find like a Idi Amin branded scent of some sort that had been shared in East Africa and the Gulf states at some point in time. But no, I don't know. Like, remember when he was just selling scents and fragrances? Like, I don't know anything like this. The meme coin thing is different, though. Like, nobody in my family will listen to me talk about the meme coin stuff anymore because I'm so one note about it and I'm so negative about it. But this is total bullshit.
Yeah, it's just like an obvious grift bribe.
It's like
combo joint, right?
It's like, I'm gonna grift. This is a grift. This is
right.
So first you give me the money, and then there's a rug pull. That's what I'm going to do in a little bit. But it seems so blatantly obvious. I don't think we have any idea who's giving him this money. I don't know where it goes. I don't know why somebody his age needs any more money. I mean, you can't take it with you. And all accounts that I've heard suggest that he doesn't believe the world will exist after he passes away. So like this is like a 10-year gamble. And 4 of them he's going to be president for. So I just don't see how this is a good idea. It seems like almost purposeless. It seems compulsive. Like I must defraud people.
Right. Just because I can.
Yeah. Or like I can't not defraud people. Like if there's a way to defraud people. Maybe there's some people around him who are getting paydays from this. Or maybe the function of it's just a big distraction from the fact that the world's wealthiest men are like, doing push-ups and then coming to Mar-a-Lago to talk about how masculine they are while they just plunder the world and then go on their super yachts. I just don't... This is very hard to understand.
Well, let me ask about the sort of combination of like the tech oligarchy, I don't have a great word for this, but like the information distribution apparatus and the federal government are now just kind of collapsing into one giant super entity. Has there ever been another example that you're aware of, maybe in Indonesia, and maybe it's like newspapers and radio stations, but like now the functional equivalent is like entire social media websites and private chat groups, which is freaking me out as like a WhatsApp user. I'm going to get the fuck off of that platform pretty soon here because I don't trust Mark Zuckerberg at all anymore. But when these billionaires and these oligarchs are bending the knee to the new emperor of the country, at the same time as they control the information distribution channels in the country, that they're clearly now biasing toward being essentially state media for this new regime. Have you ever seen anything like that before? And is there a way for normal people to break it? I mean, this is what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the distinctive thing about this time is that social media, to a large extent, as we understand it, is an American invention. The center of all these things is Silicon Valley. The other center is China. There's other places around the world, but these are the big ones. So, like, authoritarian regimes prior to the age of mass media, of mass social media and the internet, regularly would have regime-controlled newspapers, right? Like, the Russians used to have this concept of samizdat, which is these like subtle, like, self-produced pamphlets and stuff like that you would share underground. The reason why that had to be shared underground is because everything in public was illegal to talk about.
So they're like zines, right? Like
yeah,
sort of,
it's like zines, but you could go to jail for them. Yeah, It's like if you wanted to publish zines and Rage Against the Machine,
right?
Like like that. What was that old Harvey Danger song?
Yes.
Like, yeah.
I want to publish zines and Rage Against Machines. Yeah. I want to pierce my tongue. It doesn't hurt. It feels fine. Yeah.
Yeah. It seemed. Yeah. Who knew that Harvey Danger was so so prescient.
We did our first 90s rock reference. Proud of us.
Yeah, it will not be the last. But when you think about that, like in the era prior to the internet and to like individual access to every human on the planet, right? Basically through your phone. In the era prior to that, it was fairly easy to control information. You had to control the airwaves, you had to control the radio waves, you had to control the newspapers, you had to control the TV. And then people could circulate things, cassettes and stuff like that. So like the Ayatollah Khomeini was really good about sharing things in cassettes. So like there's ways to get around that, but it was slow and it was hard. The difference now is that social media have morphed into, that's like the window through which people access the internet. And the example that I reach to for what that means comes from when Burma, or today Myanmar, first got access to the internet after they started sort of lifting restrictions to things. And the story was nobody in Burma really had a computer, and so they never had the stage of like going to browsers and looking things up, right? What the first exposure they had to the internet was the Facebook app on their phone. And so for them, Facebook is functionally the internet. Like
right.
if you look for things on the internet, what that means is like looking on Facebook, right? We are moving to a world in which that is the case right now for us. And it means that people who are not even moderately savvy internet users are just not going to be able to escape the world around them. Like they are going to be, like the platform is an ecosystem. Like the metaverse is a little bit silly, but the premise behind the metaverse is that like you just go lose yourself in my ecosystem. And we know that these ecosystems exist for somebody to get paid a little bit more.
Right.
And the control they have on the ability to share information is really absolute. And do you remember when people used to say that the government was censoring information, that's why we had to go to Twitter?
Well, this is my follow-up question is like, there was this moment in like Web 2.0 where, we can finally go around the gatekeepers in the traditional media and in the government, and we can share widely the truth of what's going on. We have these eyewitness accounts. Remember the Arab Spring? This was like basically the entire justification for it. That lasted about 5 minutes, and now it's that these companies are controlled by people with political self-interest, and they're using these platforms to distort reality in order to make the case for their continued bent toward the right wing. Like Mark Zuckerberg's transformation is particularly horrifying because in the first Trump administration, he was funding nonprofits to do things like help immigrants, immigration reform, fighting climate change, investing in renewable energy, and now he's made a full 180 and is on stage with this guy, literally bringing him a bag of cash and gearing his algorithm towards silencing dissent. This is a good transition to a brief aside. You had a piece that you published on the Episcopal bishop that kind of dressed Donald Trump down during a traditional sermon just the other day, censored on Meta just yesterday. Can you talk a little bit about your piece and what happened?
Yeah, so like I wrote, as like a turbo nerd with like a crippling internet addiction, I spent a lot of time.
Welcome to the club.
I spent a lot of time reading about like weird parts of the history of things I'm associated with. So I went to Episcopalian church growing up. The National Cathedral is a place I used to visit as a kid. And so seeing the bishop dress down President Trump in what I thought was like a very, very, like, to the extent which I understand what this means, like Christian way, like a good, solid Christian way. Like we should protect those who are vulnerable. We should protect those who are in trouble. And we should care for those who are members of our community. Like to see him, decide that that was some sort of affront, made me mad. And so I wrote something about, the interesting history of the Episcopalian Church in the United States. It was the Church of England, functionally in the United States. And so when the United States became independent, they had to break from the king. So in addition to being the Church of England, which doesn't recognize a pope, it also, the Church of England in the United States no longer recognizes the King of England. And I may have said Nazi salute in that blog post at one point. But this is a little essay written on my WordPress blog, which I've been keeping since 2004. So like we are not talking about high volume, high readership stuff. And I shared it on Facebook because, like my mom looks at Facebook and my cousins look at Facebook. So I figured this would be kind of cool. And they took it down. And I was very surprised that they took it down. I have appealed the decision. They said it violated community standards. It was spam. Subsequently, I have confirmation from various friends around the world that it is banned in India, the Philippines, Indonesia, the UK, and the Netherlands, and it's also banned by my mom. My own mother tried to share it, marked her as spam, and I think, well, I mean, it's actually really distressing. This is actually something I sincerely do care about. You know, like I think that what the bishop did was an important form of leadership that represents a set of values that I and many Americans hold. I'm not a religious person, but the idea that it doesn't matter who you are, we're all in this together, and that like certainly Christianity tells you you're supposed to look after those who are like the stranger, the poor.
Plain text of the New Testament. This is not in dispute, right? Like,
yeah. Like this is like, it's all written down. They wrote it down and they published it. It's called the Bible. And you can find it in your hotel room. It's all over the place. There's all sorts of reasons why this is non-controversial. The idea that is censored is kind of crazy. I should also note that the previous, like a couple days before, I had written something about shitcoins, which used all sorts of bad words, had unlicensed Simpsons material, like meme coins are like, I was trying to make the point that they are the Lyle Lanley. They are not, it's the Springfield monorail. This is not just like snake oil. These aren't small things. This is like an attempt to steal money from a community in public on purpose.
Right.
And that was not banned. But the second that I talk about Elon Musk doing a Nazi salute, or the second that I mentioned Trump, I don't know what it was that violated the community standards, but they took it down for me and for my mom. And so she'll have, Mr. Zuckerberg will be hearing from her momentarily, I'm pretty sure. But
So
hopefully,
if you're listening to this, we are not yet in the gulag.
yeah.
None of it. It's still, we have not been flagged yet.
Right. Not yet. But the thing is, like, it means that like the technology to share this is actually hard. Like this is the thing I want people to read, and it's going to have to go into the group chats like modern day samizdat. Like it's going to be the Russian.
This is the zine. It's on Blue Sky, the underground internet. Like what the fuck?
No, that's the only place that it can run wild in the current era.
I guess I'm gonna have to figure out how to get on the dark web.
The dark web of tompepinsky.com/blog.
Right. Well, let's try to go in a slightly different direction. What are the key indicators, as you've studied oligarchic systems across history, that signal that a democracy is going in this direction?
I think that, I mean, this is going to sound like very obvious, but it is meant to be profound. It is like when the people who are oligarchs, when the wealthy, when the super wealthy, when they stand shoulder to shoulder in support of the government, when they donate money to the government, when they donate, how much did Elon Musk pledge to Trump's campaign? I remember my text.
$250
I think.
Yeah.
Like it was like $40 million a month or something like that. And my text thread is full of people saying, "You can't be so gullible, Tom. Musk's not going to do that. That's just the Wall Street Journal making it up." And it obviously happened, and obviously he did it. So it's when the tech oligarch, and when any oligarchs, when they stand shoulder to shoulder, when they celebrate the victory of their candidate, give them a whole bunch of money, and when your friends are like, don't believe it, that's made up, but you can't, then I think we're in trouble, right? We are in an ecosystem in which people are listening to like Joe Rogan for 3 hours a day, and this is not a place where people are sharing information that is honest, right? So I think, my worrying signals is just like all the stuff we saw on TV over the past week, which it's exactly what you think the problem is. Why is anybody taking Mark Zuckerberg's turn to masculinity seriously? Because they're afraid that if they call out this like comical pre-divorced behavior, then we'll lose access to like our friends and our social networks. We won't be able to talk anymore.
I mean, this is what's really troubling. And like, I quit Facebook back in 2022. I quit Twitter the day Musk bought it. Like, it probably limited the growth of this podcast. I don't give a shit. That is not why we do this. I don't care. I refuse to participate in these websites and in these efforts that enrich these people. When you and I talked a couple weeks ago and prep for this interview, one of the questions I had for you, and I'm going to ask you here, is how do these things end? I mean, I didn't know Suharto II was in power in Indonesia, actually, so that's new information. And it's troubling that you're saying that there's a lot of memory holding of all of the genocide and a lot of uplifting of all the good things that were done over that period of time. But, like, what fissure exists? You're already seeing it socially. I mean, Elon Musk basically lopped Vivek Ramaswamy off of this fake Doge thing and sent him back to Ohio to run for governor. That's pretty concerning.
It's very funny. That's
he's also not going to be governor of Ohio, fucking obviously. So, like, so I guess we'll see that one play out. But, like, how do these things end? Like, what can either be done on the normal citizenry level, especially with this sort of control of all the, like, distribution channels of information, to say nothing of, like, when do these oligarchs start fighting amongst themselves and this thing actually collapses under its own weight? Is that a guarantee, or is that something that needs prodding along?
It needs prodding along. It's also very hard to do yourself. It's not like a choice we can make. It's not a switch that we can flip. But
we can't just start posting that, like, Elon's, kissing Donald Trump's booty for real, and that's going to do it all by itself. That's shit posting our way to victory here.
Yeah, I would like that to be the way that we overthrow the current regime. And, like, I can't rule it out because that guy is online a lot.
Right, and he reads his mentions.
Yeah, like a lot. Like, I've got the crippling internet addiction. I don't stay up all night convincing people that I'm an elite gamer. Like, that is it's a different anonymous people on the internet. Like, I don't do those sorts of things. But so it is possible. Like, I can't rule out that, like, he could be consumed by his own vibe shift. That's a thing. But no, in the way that it normally works in the countries that I have studied is that you get a crisis that emerges. And it may be because of actions that the regime took, but often it can also just be because something else happens in some neighboring country and it spills over into your country. Like, the crisis that kicked Suharto out was started because of, like, irresponsible investing in the real estate market in Bangkok, which is, like, a couple countries over. It spills to a region anyway. So when the economy gets shaky, what can often happen, doesn't always happen, importantly. Sometimes it doesn't happen. What can happen, though, is if the nature of the policy problem is such that it divides the oligarchs against one another, they can't all get what they want. We can either have more tariffs or fewer tariffs. And they're going to try really hard to, like, make carve-outs and things like this. But at some level, it'll be something like an exchange rate, which you cannot have multiple exchange rates unless you want to live like Argentina, which, like, good luck to you.
Right, it's not going great.
So, like, that's what happens, and that can drive them apart. And when they can drive apart, they can make the oligarchs turn on each other very quickly. Perhaps there's, like, a part of the mansion where Zuck and Musk and Bezos sit around and, like, admire each other, but I'm pretty sure that they hate each other too.
Right.
And
they all want to be the richest guy in the room, and they can't all be the richest guy in the room, right?
Right. So, like, they would turn on each other if there was a good reason to, but right now they figure that they can get more out of complying, and they seem to be racing to comply the fastest with one another. But this is an insight that's not just something that comes from economic crises or from the Indonesian case. This is a general finding from comparative politics about what happens to authoritarian regimes. Like, the proximate cause of the collapse of most authoritarian regimes that don't collapse to, like, a social revolution, which we are not going to have in this country, is that the elites split. And then you get this set of what they call hardliners and a set of softliners. And the hardliners are ride or die with the regime. They've got nowhere else to go, so they're going to go down with the ship. And the softliners are the ones who are like, you want to know what? I don't have to go down with the ship, and perhaps I can be on board with the next stage of things. And it's the softliners, like, nobody's going to want to hear what I'm about to say, but, like, it's much more likely that Mike Johnson overturns Donald Trump, overthrows Trump, than Chuck Schumer.
I believe that.
Yeah. Like, that's what it's going to be. And it's going to be Mike Johnson sitting down with his counterparts across the aisle who share something in common, which is they both want to be reelected, and saying, we got to get this guy out of here.
So you're talking basically about some outside things that have happened that have derailed some of these oligarchies or other authoritarian type governments. Are there lessons that can be drawn from some other countries or times in history where people have successfully prevented or reversed this sort of effort?
Great question. So like instead of getting to the stage in which you're run by an oligarchy, or like the oligarchs are in charge and now you have to get them out, how do you inoculate yourself against them in the first place?
Yeah.
So if you were to ask Winters would say, wherever you have people defending their wealth, you have oligarchy. And so this is, the nature of the oligarchy varies, but the presence really doesn't, right? Any capitalist economy is an oligarchy. I don't believe that. I think that there's a distinction between there being wealthy people and an inequality, which is good or bad. How good or bad that is up to you. And the sort of situation that we find ourselves in right now, where it seems to be that there's very little limit. Everybody knows that Doge is illegal. That can't exist.
Right.
They're just going to do it until they're stopped, right? And so like that's like, I feel like this is a very different, like a categorically different type of scenario. So how do we prevent things like this?
Or how do we break it?
Breaking it, we have to wait for things that divide them. So somebody had written somewhere a take such that was something like, like make Donald Trump be the president, like make him make these decisions, like saddle him with the responsibility of actually being the president. That's a thing that you can do, because then he's the person who's responsible for whatever decisions are made, and very few decisions make everybody happy equally, right? Even
like
when
someone's ox is going to get gored, right? Like
yeah. At some level, there's going to be a split. But I think, Jason, the more troubling question is, how do we inoculate ourselves against this in the first place?
Yeah.
And I don't really know. I mean, I would recommend not having massive inequality. I would recommend campaign finance reform. Like, that's one thing that Indonesia and the United States share is a great concern these days, with like perhaps having public financing of campaigns rather than private financing of campaigns might be a better idea, might be a better arrangement. We don't have that right now. So like it seems silly that like it could be something very similar. It could be something very simple, like just not allowing people to give unlimited money to super PACs. Like something like that. That's just that's like a regulatory change. And like when that was illegal, it didn't happen. Or like when people who did it went to jail. Like it was, we can implement that rule and we can enforce that law very easily.
I guess like I'm wondering, I have a couple different questions that are all swimming in my head right now, but one of them is like, I agree with you that if you change the sort of foundational ability for people to buy elections, these sorts of outcomes don't happen. But was this sort of bound to happen? Like, I don't agree with Winters necessarily. I think I'm more with you in terms of like, anytime there's a capitalist involved in politics doesn't necessarily mean there's an oligarch. But it feels like a fair question to ask, is the current situation we find ourselves in basically the final form of American capitalism? That like the richest people in the country will just buy an office and use it to extract all the wealth they can and or consolidate all the power they can. Just kind of they picked the lock, and it wasn't that hard of a lock to pick. Right? Like there were forms of it before, Citizens United, the Koch brothers, some of these like larger conservative, the State Policy Network, 50 different nonprofits from the right wing in 50 different states that have been radically transforming states toward the right for over the last several decades. It just kind of feels like now that we're here, it was almost inevitable. Is that misplaced, or do you think there's something to that?
But there's something, I don't think anything is inevitable. I think politics is chaotic, and like things can happen, and almost certainly we do not know what the news story is going to be 12 months from today. So like at some level, I don't think it was inevitable. I think a much harder question is like, what would have stopped it? Like what could have happened? And I don't think you can do things like get rid of Newt Gingrich, right? You can't get rid of people who are willing to play constitutional hardball.
Right.
Interesting. I sat through an interesting debate the other day about whether or not like that was anti-democratic, what he did. And I don't think it was. Like he didn't violate.
He just kind of hacked the program as it was hackable, right?
Yeah. It was like you don't have to compromise with the opposition. You don't want to. Like what happens if you just say, okay, I only care about my party, not the country. Like the Constitution says doesn't say you can't do that, and he didn't do it, and so that's what happened. But I do think, like, I don't know enough about this period of recent American history, but like, no Citizens United, no Elon Musk in Doge. I think that's
for sure. Yes,
yeah.
I think that's a straight line.
Like, there are laws that were, or there are decisions that were made, and there are rulings that were made that enabled a certain type of politics, and we all knew it was going to happen. And I guess I'm just surprised at how fast it happened and how bad it happened. Don't you guys miss like Rockefellers or like Morgans? Wouldn't like a railroad trust be a lot more exciting to work with? Those guys thought that you should build libraries with your wealth. Not like blow
like
up
ones.
Yeah, not like blow up coal.
Elon Musk doesn't think there should be libraries because you can just ask Grok anything and give it your medical records and then you'll be fine, right? Like,
right. Yeah, it's like it's like internet people. It's like people. It's like the people who had an internet problem in college are now in charge of the world.
Absolutely.
Are there specific policies, such as immigration comes to mind here, that have traditionally played into the message of right-wing governments that move toward the direction we're moving toward?
Yeah, I think that like the question of citizenship is basically the main question, and I've learned this from a co-author of mine at Irvine named Sarah Goodman, who's she works on citizenship, and I didn't really know what that meant until I started learning from her about how this works. But the cleavage is a citizenship cleavage. It's like, who are the citizens? And it's easiest to understand in terms of like, are people, like, take a country like Hungary, which like there's an ethnic, the ethnic group is in the name of the country. There's Hungarians and there's non-Hungarians.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's very easy to say in a fairly clear ethno-state that like the people who are not like us are not citizens, and therefore we are not going to listen to them. And immigrants, by definition, are not like that. So that's fairly easy. You can also see this in the United States and in Western Europe, and also many parts of Asia as well, with the 3 parts of the world that I know the best, in which maybe it's not about your ethnicity, but it's like, to be a citizen, you got to do sorts of things. You got to be a certain way. And I think we are closer to that in this country than we have been. Like, that's been more explicitly clear in this country than it has in a very long time.
Can you think of a good example somewhere else?
I mean, like anywhere in the Netherlands, like Denmark, all of the debates about what, like, should immigration be controlled, or like people who are allowed to settle here, can they be citizens? Can they have full rights? Can they be like us? Or are we going to have basically a modern guest worker program in which they can come here, but their right of residence is explicitly tied to their employer, and if they don't live up to their contract, they can be expelled, and they have to live in certain places, and their children aren't citizens, and their children are not citizens. Like that. That's like, the world has been run that way before. Europe's been run that way since we've been alive.
Right.
Or like parts of Europe, and it's no longer anymore. But like, that's a precedent that exists, and I think that this question of citizenship, of like, that's an issue that matters. Citizenship can mean literally like what country you're a citizen of. It can also mean like what makes you a proper citizen, like a right type of citizen. So like is this what a citizen looks like? Is this how a citizen talks? Is this what a citizen does? Am I being a good American?
What if you had a red hat?
Yeah.
And then and then they're redefining the terms in real time. They're attempting to, through executive order, overturn the 14th Amendment, which is fucking insane. They're attempting to roll back temporary protective status for immigrants. They stopped airplanes full of refugees who had already been cleared to come into the country where they were. There are entire immigration centers in Mexico and on the border that are shutting down and turning people away who are already halfway through their asylum applications at this moment. Like, they're definitely playing on that division, and it reminds me of sort of like comparative lit theory shit I studied in college around construction of the other, where you have this correct, proper citizen who, you were pointing it out, but like is a heterosexual white Christian through the MAGA definition, and then anyone who doesn't fit that strict definition can be othered, can be oppressed, and can be expelled under what these guys seem to be wanting to do.
Yeah. They're like a virus.
Right, exactly. And they use words like vermin, very Nazi-esque type language that scares the shit out of people like me. I want to switch gears a little tiny bit. Like, maybe this is relevant. Maybe you don't study this part of American history this closely. Maybe there's an Indonesian or another example of something you do study. But what about the aftermath? Like, let's say that, like, somehow we are successful in breaking this oligarchy, whether it's the one guy needs high interest rates and the one guy needs low interest rates and they go to war over that, or Trump, like, is saddled with the responsibility of a tariff-fueled Great Depression and it all comes crashing down. And in 2 years, Democrats, take the House and Senate. And in 4 years, we have a Democratic trifecta in government again. I'm thinking about like the post-Nixon era in this country where like naked corruption, incompetence, and greed was exposed for all, and there was an actual appropriate political reaction to it, which was, let's not give these fucking guys any power for a little while at least. As like Democratic operatives, this is sort of our fervent hope, is that the pendulum will just kind of continue to swing in reaction to the horrible shit that's going on in front of us, like it did after 16 in 18 and 20. And maybe this is the reaction to that. Do you have a sense of, like, let's say these guys actually do fall apart and lose elections? What's a program that the Democratic Party, as it's currently constructed, and I know that is a leading question, could invest in politically and policy-wise and materially to break this sort of corruption and the ability for us to have gotten here in the first place?
I think that a lot of it is going to have to be, like, we're going to have to pick some fights. I think that AOC's ability to say things like, every billionaire is a policy failure, I think that's the sort of thing that will have to be said. I think it's going to be really hard. A lot of Democrats are wealthy. A lot of Democrats like being close with the pharma industry. A lot of Democrats like having access to Davos. But I think we will have to. I'm taking myself as a Democrat. We're going to have to pick fights in this, and it's going to be a compromise. But I think that, like, do not let wealthy people steal from you. They're taking food off of your plates, and they're making your parents and they're taking away your parents' retirement. This is the stuff. It actually doesn't matter if it's true, which is one thing that we've learned. We need to say it. I mean, it is true, which is nice. So
and it will certainly be true.
Yeah.
But the point isn't that it's true. The point is that it actually properly divides the country into the heroes and villains on the right axis instead of what's happened right now, where somehow they ran this anti-elitism campaign with the most elite people in the country who are now running fucking everything as a result of that.
Right. So their problem is that, like, people like me like banh mi tacos. But what they really are mad about, what ought to be mad about, is that Elon Musk has like $400 billion and he wants more. Like, that's right. Like, the fact that I'm slightly obnoxious about how I have my supper I am not the elite that you should be concerned about.
But what's it going to take? I mean, it feels like there's this like built-in disorientation in the American psyche where it's like, instead of seeing like billionaire wealth extractor as like bad supervillain who needs to be dismantled and have his wealth redistributed, as like hero aspirational figure that I too could be like one day if only I followed him on Twitter enough. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Is like totally. That feels to be a real problem here.
Totally. Like I don't like psychological explanations for things, but I just think that there's some people who look at the alpha predator and say, like, that's gross. And some people look at the alpha predator and, like, that's what I want to be. And I don't know which representative said, I think they said alpha predator about Greenland. Like, we're the alpha predator in the neighborhood, which is just a quote from, who was the guitarist for Ted Nugent. That's a Ted Nugent behind the music quote. I'm the alpha predator. He's like, it is very much a psychological disposition, which I don't understand. But I do think that there are things besides just saying we're going to take the billionaires, take all their money away from them. I think we got to break up the trusts. We've done it before. We're doing it again. The trusts are called social media companies. They need to be broken up. Their net neutrality is not a joke. Thank goodness Spectrum doesn't throttle my internet for my views. This is my internet provider.
Yeah.
What's stopping them from doing it?
Nothing now.
Do you think that Starlink is unbiased in its connectivity? I don't know, but I don't think so. I wouldn't trust it. The last time he gained control of a thing, he bought Twitter, and now you know what happened. So I think that, like, breaking up the trusts is like a precondition for thing, and the trusts now are the social media companies. I think net neutrality. I think we need to take steps ourselves about how we organize, about how we relate to one another. I think, like, getting off of meta products is going to be very hard for people. It's going to be very hard. But meta products have to be, at the very least, they can only be for, like, your kids' videos where they crash doing ski tricks and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It can't be for real politics. And then we have to make sure that our kids, I have a child who now has a social media account, and Insta is showing different ads now.
Yeah.
And it's showing ads about TikTok, and you got to talk to your kids about that sort of stuff. And fortunately, my own child is radicalizing in the same direction as me, but it's not going to be true for everybody. So that
No,
I think
I'm totally terrified that as our 5-year-old and then our soon to be 0-year-old, their mother is a member of Congress, and it is an easy way to rebel against your parents to just go join the other political movement than the one you've given your life to. So we are trying really hard to teach our kid the values.
Make sure they only wear berets.
This has been awesome, by the way. Thank you so much for coming on.
I don't know, man. You guys are so much fun to talk to. I would do this every Thursday if you wanted to.
We will have plenty of reasons to ask you to come back, unfortunately for all of us. But before we let you go, Tom, how do people follow your work besides TomPepinsky.com, the website Mark Zuckerberg does not want you to visit? Where can people follow you? What evil oligarchical owned media channels can they find you on?
Well, back in the early days of the internet, there was something called RSS, which stands for Really Simple Syndication. And it was the platform behind, it's an architecture that allows people to read things called blogs. Blogs were web logs. It was like a log of your activity on the internet, but you didn't put it on a social media site, and you didn't update it once or twice an hour. Rather, it was a way to read long-form essays. And so that website, tompepinsky.com/blog, you can read my long-form work by subscribing to the RSS feed, which if you Google how to subscribe to an RSS feed and turn off the AI function of the Google, you will probably get the right answer for how to do that. And then I'm also, I've joined Blue Sky, and I will stay on Blue Sky so long as it is not owned by somebody who wishes to throttle it. But it's an interesting platform. It seems to be robust to some forms of external control, but I've been proven wrong before. So for now, you can find me there. And if you want to reach out to me directly, it's just my last name, Pepinsky@cornell.edu. You can always reach me there.
You can email him, you can read his weblog, and you can find him on Blue Sky at tompepinsky.com. Tom Pepinsky, professor at Cornell University, expert in all the things we are terrifyingly and suddenly facing, and now friend of the pod. Thank you so much for coming on the Get More Smarter podcast. It was awesome to talk to you. You give me a little bit of hope. You scared the living shit out of me, but I actually feel like I got a little more smarter today.
Scary
Jason,
hope.
how about you?
That's good. Yeah.
Scary hope.
Thank you so much for having me. If I can make one person a little bit more crabby throughout the rest of their day, then my work here is done.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. We'll see you soon. Take care out there.
I still think you can't be a great oligarchy, kleptocracy, unless you live in a hollowed out volcano, unless that's where your base is.
The dude literally has a fucking tower in the middle of New York with his name on it. I'm not sure the volcano is the operative building.
It's just my own personal standard.
Well, Zuckerberg's got that bunker in Hawaii. That's pretty close.
Yeah, that's true.
These guys are all just comic book villains, man. It's not even interesting. It's just terrifying and kind of boring at the same time.
I would take boring.
I would take boring.
Let's talk a little bit more about no longer president-elect Donald Trump. We're going to keep talking about Trump here because so much of what has happened in the last week is related directly to the big orange guy. Side note, I don't think we've had this discussion, but before we get started, I want to say how irritated I am by the fact that news outlets, some of them are describing Trump numerically as 45 and 47.
Well, Grover Cleveland was the 22nd and 24th, right?
Yeah, but that doesn't make any sense to me. Like Barack Obama served 2 terms, so was he 44 and 45?
So would you suggest that we just keep calling Trump 45 from now on? Or just call him 47 from now on? Or just call him Donald Trump?
I think I'd just stay with 45. He was 45.
Right.
And he did it again. But he's not the 45th person, or he's not the 47th person.
No, he's the 40th, but he is the 47th president because it was Trump, Biden, Trump. I see what you're getting at. I think it bothers me less.
I'm trying to find little pointless things to bother me instead of the big things.
Yeah, it's good to be fixated on technicalities so you don't have to deal with like the horror.
The Trump inauguration took place earlier this week inside the U.S. Capitol because it was too cold outside in Washington, D.C. We did
And because you didn't have enough RSVPs to fill up the mall, let's face it.
Yeah, that's true. We did a live-ish video of the two of us watching the festivities in double time. Check that out on our YouTube page.
That was
hopefully
more fun than I thought it would be, but I'm still mad at you for making me watch it.
But watching it fast was better.
Yeah, it was
and we could fact check some of it. Yeah.
Took us an hour and 15 minutes instead of 3 fucking hours. So yeah, that was great.
If you missed the Trump speech, it was not very bright.
It was also like pretty low energy. It was like a lot of like, yeah, we're gonna deport everybody. Joe Biden sucks.
The United States sucks. Joe Biden
the country sucks.
Now I'm here. It'll be better.
I hate our
blah,
country.
blah, blah.
I hate you.
The other thing that happened before and after the speechifying, Trump issued more than 100 executive orders. A lot of them are hard to understand. Some of them are flat out probably unconstitutional. Let's dig in a little bit to not all 100, of course, but let's dig into the highlights and or lowlights.
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the video version now, I'm showing the Associated Press, who has a pretty comprehensive look at all this stuff. They fall into a few broad categories, and the broadest category most of them fall into is unconstitutional, but like we can look at the substance a little bit more. Unsurprisingly, immigration tops the list. A few lowlights, designating, quote, an invasion across the southern border of the United States, end quote, which will essentially give Trump expanded powers to use military force on the border. Speaking of which, he's allowing the U.S. military service to act as immigration and border enforcement agents. I think he sent a couple hundred Marines down to the border this week. Mm-hmm. So if you don't want to aid and abet mass deportations, now would not be a great time to, say, join the National Guard. He's also suspending the U.S. refugee admission program, redefining birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment. This one is certainly unconstitutional. This one is already being challenged by, among other people, Attorney General of the show, Phil Weiser.
Last I saw, I think there are 23 states now.
Probably everyone with a Democratic AG.
Yeah.
Or governor or both. He's going to finally build that wall, Jason. He's doing it.
Yeah.
Notably without pretending that Mexico is going to pay for it this time. There's quite a bit more about refugees. He's already turning airplanes around that were already previously chartered with refugees from war-torn, violent, and otherwise oppressive parts of the world who were coming here to take advantage of, and I mean that in the literal sense, not any metaphorical sense, the nation's vaunted refugee and asylum policy, which Trump still thinks has something to do with mental institutions, but he's a stupid dum-dum, and that is not what it means. Under the banner of trade, Trump is already beginning the trade and tariff wars he promised, including levying a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico, in clear violation of his own USMCA agreement, which was a NAFTA rewrite from his first administration. And he promises to start the, quote, external review service to collect his promised tariffs, which are taxes on American consumers and will absolutely increase the prices of basically everything. So for those of you who are voting for lower egg prices, get ready for higher egg prices.
At what point does he realize this or figure this out?
Who, Trump?
Yeah, that
he doesn't
people
care.
Are paying. Well, but he's going to get.
He's not paying.
It's going to be a big story at some point. How much prices have gone up because of his tariffs?
Let's hope so, and let's hope it matters. They might just call it the freedom tax or something. And just quick mention, I want to shout out friend of the show, Center for New Liberalism, who has a new website you should check out called TrumpsTariffsAreTaxes.org to remove all doubt. And, much more. Go check out this AP article. We'll put it in the show notes if you're curious. But this is some really scary stuff. We haven't even gotten to the climate stuff yet. We haven't even gotten to the federal ban on recognizing people who are gender non-binary or trans. We haven't even gotten to the removal of all DEI policies and a fucking, rat outline for people in the federal government who are pursuing DEI policies. This feels like just a smokescreen in order to fire anybody who's a person of color or a woman and just hire straight white dudes. That feels pretty accurate. And of course, Donald Trump pardoned the vast majority of, if not all of, the January 6 rioters, including Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio and eye patch guy from the Oath Keepers, Stuart Rhodes.
Who are like immediately out of jail.
Yeah,
Which
no, Stuart
surprised
Rhodes
me.
was sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts in the Rayburn office building, which is where House members work, yesterday.
I was a little surprised at how fast that happened. Like,
It's
it was like
gonna happen
midnight
fast. Yeah.
that they were let out of jail.
Of course, some reporters are still asking some questions that are relevant to this conversation. Here's an exchange from a Trump press conference that we are airing from our friends at Fox News, who are our friends now, Jason.
Sure. It's all whataboutism. Oh yeah, you've been there?
Donald Trump, prison abolitionist.
Yeah, do you think it's weird that you pardon someone who or pardon people who assaulted police officers?
Look at the murderers.
Some people don't get charged for murder. Okay, but it's just. And then remember when Trump, when he was campaigning and promised to end the war in Ukraine immediately?
Yeah, how's he going to do it?
Just with tariffs again.
Oh, tariffs. Oh, I was wondering how he was going to do it. Tariffs and tweets, it seems.
Because of all the trade we're still doing with Russia. Like, is there anything left?
I don't know.
To
Tariffs and
stop?
tweets on Truth Social appear to be the idea. This from a post on his website that will probably be bought by Elon Musk to pad his pockets pretty soon here. He goes on this long tirade threatening to put tariffs on Russia if they don't stop the war, make a deal right now, blah, blah, blah. Hey, Jason, do you think this is going to work?
I'm going to guess no.
Probably not. Vladimir Putin sitting around going, oh, shit. He's shit posting about it.
Oh, that's strange.
I guess we should just stop the invasion now.
Yeah. Well, he really showed us. And that leads us into a discussion about our seventh favorite member of Congress from Colorado.
I don't know. He's making a run at the top spot, man. He is either going to tie or supersede our current eighth favorite member of Congress pretty soon here. This is like only his third week of work, and he's already getting on the list here.
We've talked about Gabe-ish Evans. The ish nickname is because he has a hard time taking positions on things that are not immediately intractable, and he tries to avoid saying things despite how they fit right in the wheelhouse of how he campaigned. For example, Trump's executive order letting insurrectionists out of prison is a problem for a guy who was a quote-unquote law and order candidate. Gabe Evans talked about how he was a police officer and how law enforcement's so important to him. And he didn't have a lot to say, though, about the fact that Trump let people out of jail who attacked police officers. Before we get to that, here's what, if you were somebody who was actually worried about police officers, here's what you would say in response to all of this. Here's Capitol Police Officer Michael Fanone on CNN.
Who was attacked viciously during the January 6th insurrection and riot at the Capitol, and was begging for people to actually support police officers in this moment where the party of law and order refused to.
Woo!
Got him.
I mean, that's the perfect way to say it.
Yep. I
You would
also
thi-
appreciate, like, you're not going to let these fucking tough guys, like, you know, pretend to be strutting around and being all strong. You're going to call them on their bullshit, and you're going to take the fight to them. That's good stuff. So many of these Capitol Police officers who have Harry Dunn, Michael Fanone, who have been out there trying to get people to realize truly the magnitude of the violation of the country that happened that day. I mean, I'm sure their hearts are just fucking broken. Like, there's
Absolutely
nothing. It's just despicable stuff.
Of Colorado's 4 Republican members of Congress, it was not the law and order guy, Gabish Evans, who spoke up. Turns out the only Republican with a spine is our buddy Bread Sandwich.
Yeah, man, he is climbing up the charts. We made fun of Jeff Hurd a lot because he liked the nickname we gave him, Bread Sandwich, which was generated because he was just rather uninteresting. He's shedding that, and he's becoming a lot more interesting. And let's take a look at this clip from our friend of the pod, Kyle Clark, 9 News. Do you want to use Brittany? Do you want to use mine? Yeah, you just have to hold down the button. There isn't being charged over next to the bed. It's those same ones that you have.
Kyle Clark, later on at 9 News, followed up with this.
His first comment down here. So a rhino. Awesome stuff. Way to go, man. Way to go, Bread Sandwich. You are earning yourself an upgrade. You are now a toast sandwich.
Caitlin Kim of Colorado Public Radio did finally run down Gabe Evans at one point. She asked him if Trump should have pardoned people convicted of violence against law enforcement. Evans said he doesn't support violence against law enforcement. Well, who does? And added that he thinks...
Well, Donald Trump does, it turns out.
Right. He added he thinks the Department of Justice overcharged some January 6 rioters and that we need to look forward. This is something he said also on KOA radio the next day. Marty Lenz asked him if he agreed with the pardons or should there have been a more serious, deeper look at them versus the sweeping ones. Gabish says, well, like I said, I don't think we should assault police officers. And I also think that, again, the American people want us to be able to focus on looking forward. What an unbelievable coward.
Yeah, fucking douchebag. One-termer. Don't put
Unbelievable.
any books on the shelf, man. You're not going to be there very long.
No. All right, let's talk about our still 8th favorite member of Congress from Colorado.
She kind of embarrassed herself a little bit at the old party, didn't she?
This was a moment I really would have liked to have been the proverbial fly on the wall. As the news outlet The Spectator reports, Lauren Boebert was at a party over the weekend, one of the many inauguration parties. And it says, quote, Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, who spent a decent chunk of Saturday's America First Policy Institute ball trying to ingratiate herself with Susie Wiles. One small problem. She wasn't talking to Wiles, just a woman from the Midwest who looks slightly like her.
So just for viewers of the video version, this is a picture of Susie Wiles. And then Lauren Boebert claimed she was talking to Castilla Gingrich, Newt Gingrich's wife, which, I mean, I could see it. Can you see it?
I mean, in fairness, Susie Wiles looks and Castilla Gingrich look like every Karen you've ever met. But
right, exactly.
The random person that she was probably talking to, I'd like to imagine whatever this person was thinking, like, why in the hell does this little tiny woman keep asking me about White House policy?
She's just a nice lady from the Midwest she's just happy to be invited to the party, Jason.
That's right. And as Kyle Clark mentioned earlier, Boebert is also offering to give January 6 protesters a tour of the Capitol.
Another tour of the Capitol.
Seems redundant, yeah.
Yeah, right. I thought, kind of figured. We've been through this once before. Did a little recon mission.
They could probably give her a better
right?
tour.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, yeah, they seem to know the place these days. And they're now welcome back, which is great.
Let's talk about State Representative Scott There Is No Bottoms, who is apparently running for governor.
Of Colorado?
I guess.
That's great. I cannot think of a better thing for Democrats in Colorado than Scott Bottoms running for governor of Colorado.
He made this announcement during a sermon at his church at Briargate in Colorado Springs. The not so enthusiastic response is pretty funny, but let's play a little bit of that first clip. Like,
How many people are in the audience?
he will not be elected.
Governor, for sure.
I will bet the deed to Ian's house that he does not get elected.
I will not take that bet, but I support your
there's no chance of this man
No,
becoming
I
governor.
mean he's like he is our 100th favorite member of the Colorado Legislature, 65th in the House for sure.
We just talked last week about he being one of the guys that at the Capitol that opposed affirming the election results from 2024.
That put him back in office.
Right.
Yeah, election conspiracy theorists are sort of like roundly rejected in Colorado. So again, another in a very long list, interminable list of reasons why Scott There Is No Bottoms, will not be governor anywhere, but especially of Colorado.
There's a couple other clips that I think are funny in here. He did talk a little more in detail about how this all came about. And this is an anecdote he should probably not say out loud again. Ah. Why would you say that?
Are we sure this is the sales pitch you want?
Why
We're
would you
running
say
an
that?
out-of-state campaign for governor of Colorado. Vote Bottoms.
Just for more context, if you're not familiar with Scott There's No Bottoms, this is the guy who says shit like this. He just throws that out there like,
A couple things. Like, is this not a violation of like the tax exempt status of a religious institution to just like openly be
great point, yeah.
politicizing this? Like, is that, are we just done with rules? Like,
you
we
can
don't
just
have these
stand
anymore?
up there in a church
And like
and say, I'm running for
literally
governor.
run for governor and like,
Right.
what the fuck? And then second of all, like, yeah, you got to throw some conspiracy shit in there because you're Scott Bottoms and that's just how you roll.
But like, he just, like, I haven't seen this anywhere else. No one else has said it was a, I mean, I'm sure there are corners of the internet where this has come up, but this is the first I've heard of someone saying it was a security reason. It's not. It was cold as shit.
It was like below zero. That is the stated reason. And the obvious reason is because the RSVP count for the mall was low.
Yeah. All right, let's do a couple of quick hits and then we'll roll out of here. We have an elephant update for you.
Remember this one? Elephant personhood?
We talked a while back about that silly lawsuit that some animal rights group was doing in Colorado Springs to try to get personhood for a couple of elephants living in the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo.
This is a great story by a fan of the show, Michael Karlik. I know this because he interacts with our stuff on Blue Sky a lot. And hey, Michael, thanks for listening. This is a totally ridiculous story. Do you want to give a refresher for those who don't remember?
Yeah, the idea was that this animal rights group wanted elephants to have a personhood designation so that they could be immediately let out of the zoo. I don't know where they would go at that point.
This was the big question last time. It's like, okay, they're no longer incarcerated in this zoo because they have personhood. Do you just release them onto Tejon Street and call it good? Like,
get them a job, get them a social security card. What happens at that point? This was the Washington, D.C. based Non-Human Rights Project, which did not get what it wanted out of the Colorado Supreme Court, which ruled quite
6-0,
simply
I guess.
that Colorado's habeas law applies to persons, not animals. Quote, simply put, no Colorado court, nor any other court in any other jurisdiction in the United States has ever recognized the legal personhood of any non-human species.
Between these guys and the fucking slaughterhouse ban people that I personally whooped ass against in November, and the fur ban people, could the animal people just start fucking with Colorado? You keep losing. There's a reason for that. You're wrong.
Do something that, as we talked about when this came out the first time, like if you're going to do this, do something national that creates some sort of a program and has some sort of a solution other than just elephants are people. Then what? I don't know.
I mean, you like lose these things 6-0. It sets you back. This is not like one of those like, let's go test the waters and let's go make some progress for our animal friends. This is like you're losing and it's hurting your case.
Yeah. Yeah. Do we have an update on the resolution that wife and Congresswoman of the show, Brittany Pedersen, is moving along?
We do. And you see boy of the show, Davis, in this picture in roll call, which is fucking wild. This kid has been pictured in lots of national publications over the last few weeks. And every time it happens, I go, Davis, you're in the news. And I show him a picture of him on my phone. But he's like really used to seeing pictures of him on my phone. So he doesn't quite get what's going on here. I hope this is an endearing memory of his and not like something that he has to tell his therapist later in life.
I'm sure it'll be.
But
I'm
yeah,
sure it's good.
Brittany's actually today doing like 5 or 6 national television interviews about this. The update is that there are an increasing number of Republicans and Democrats joining the discharge petition to force a vote on this on the floor. Other folks who are on the team here are ramping up the rhetoric against Speaker Mike Johnson, who does not have an argumentative leg to stand on here. And what you need in order to have this happen is you need a certain number of, you need 218, right? A majority of the actual chamber of members have to sign on to a discharge petition in order to get it to the floor. Now, there are almost certainly enough votes to pass it. The question is, will Johnson let it on the floor? And will people like Gabe Ish Evans, like, break with his own party to support what is obviously a good thing for families if you fashion yourself as a pro-family party? This is just to allow new parents to vote by proxy for up to 12 weeks because right now Brittany is medically prevented from flying to Washington, so she cannot vote, but she is registering her votes publicly, or what they would have been, so that her constituents actually know where she would vote on things like this horrific Laken-Riley Act and some of this other nonsense. But her votes do not officially count. So right now, because of Mike Johnson, her constituents are not being represented with a vote on the floor in the House, although, of course, the rest of her office's operations are running.
And the reason this needs to be changed, Brittany is going to be the 14th person. That's it. Only the 14th person to give birth while serving as a member of Congress. This is a legislative body that doesn't change very much and hasn't changed very much, and this needs to happen.
Yeah, and, you know, just on the side of women for a second here, it turns out that if you go all the way back to the founding of the country and take every woman, living or dead, who ever served in the United States House of Representatives and put them all in the chamber, you'd have like 45 empty seats. We still have a long way to go.
That's disappointing.
Depressing statistic, for sure.
Well, it looks like we're going to be talking about this imaginary thing called clean coal for a while.
Because it's 1996.
Right. Interior Secretary nominee Doug Burgum is talking some nonsense about this. He says the United States must invest in clean coal in order to fund artificial intelligence growth. Clean coal is not a thing.
Can you imagine, we have all this advanced technology. We're literally talking about artificial intelligence. We're like bending protons to create like previously unfathomable new drugs that will like cure cancer and do like all sorts of really cool shit. And instead of just saying like, and we're going to fuel it with 100% clean renewable energy, fields of solar panels, giant wind farms, even nuclear energy if you want, you're going to say, we're going to fucking light wood on fire and burn it to do it. Because that's what coal is.
Well, I wrote about this on Colorado Polls that if this actually were to happen and ended up powering AI, the first thing the AI is going to do when it comes online is say, why in the hell are you using clean coal?
Well, clean coal doesn't exist.
It refers to a theoretical form of carbon capture and storage that is essentially, this is really dumbing it down, but it's basically trying to squeeze oil out of a rock. It would cost hundreds of billions of dollars just to build it out enough to the point that we can even figure out if it works on a large scale.
I see.
You can't do it. It doesn't exist. It's not a thing. Trump, however, still seems to think it's like just a cleaner version of rocks, of black rocks. Here he is speaking at the World Economic Forum.
I can't fucking believe we have 4 more years of this. It's like day 3.
No. 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 No.
This comment from internet star Jojo
Yeah.
from Jers. Are we really fucking doing this shit again? Pretty much sums it up.
Nothing can destroy coal. Well, that's true, given that clean coal isn't real. I guess it's not.
What about if
couldn't
you
destroy-
burn it, Jason? Does that destroy the coal?
What about a bomb? What if you drop it into a hurricane?
You can I fucking hate that I have to play Donald Trump brain interpretation again, but I know where he's coming from. He's talking about people blowing up pipelines in the ocean that is stopping.
But he thinks clean
the
coal
floor
is
of
just
natural
like
gas.
a cleaner version of the rock, and it's not. That's not what it is.
He doesn't know anything about nothing, man.
No. Let's talk a little bit more about Elon Musk and the Nazi salute.
This is fucking really fucking bad, man.
Yeah. There's been a lot of discussion this week about Elon Musk's Nazi salute at a Trump inauguration event. Here's that video. You can see it for yourself. There's no other way to explain it.
He goes, I mean, look, we've talked about this before. Grandson of Holocaust survivors over here. I know a fucking Sieg Heil when I see it. That's what that was. It was probably more in the sort of 4chan troll, make us all talk about it for 72 hours, which we fucking clearly are, than the actual Heil Hitler.
But it's important to talk about because there are a lot of media outlets where well, maybe he was just saying you have my heart, and maybe he's just weird, and or as the Hollywood Reporter had the balls to say, maybe it's a Nazi salute.
Yeah, the Hollywood Reporter, finally, we can count on the most resistance-heavy media outlets out there. The Hollywood Reporter, with a column, sometimes a Nazi salute is a Nazi salute, and that is obviously what the fuck this was. I don't...
It walks like
it's
a duck,
the same thing as, remember
like
Richard Spencer, yep. Hail Trump, Hail Our People? This is that. It's the same thing. It's, again, designed to shock and awe, and I am shocked and horrified. And I will say that I do think that if I don't know if you saw this, there's a huge number of subreddits that are now banning links to Twitter. Do you know this?
That's good.
This is good. This is resistance, right? It's we're not going to send traffic to this fucking ghoul's website anymore. I actually think it's important to start to compel Democratic elected officials and candidates to not be on the platform. People need to quit. They need to quit Facebook. They need to quit X. I don't buy the fucking argument that you're using this guy's platform to take him on because he's algorithmically throttling anybody who criticizes him. You are still enriching him by making people go to the website and spend time on it. So I think we should be getting in the business of encouraging Democratic elected officials to quit the website known as Twitter and put a post up on a quit account that says, I am leaving because I refuse to participate in Elon Musk's fucking money and power grab.
By the way, if you are not sure whether your gestures are Nazi-esque, there's this great graphic someone sent me. We'll share here.
Yep, there it is. It's not in dispute where this one lands on the spectrum.
And finally, our gibberish of the week. We got two of them. First, here's Laura Ingraham of Fox News trying to whataboutism the Nazi salute.
See, it's right there in the title.
I mean, again, raising your arm, not a Nazi salute. Keeping your hand flat and raising your arm, a little different.
We also had a listener and a fan of the show reply with this GIF that I'll put on the screen now for viewers. It is showing Adolf Hitler doing the move and Elon Musk doing the move at the exact same time, which will and should remove all doubt as to what we're looking at here.
And finally, your bonus gibberish of the week. Here's Carl Higbee of Newsmax talking shit to the Pope.
Everything's going great.
Too late for that. What a
Lecturing the Pope.
Lecturing the Pope. Right. That's where we're at in Magaland. We've reached
great.
the lecturing the Pope stage.
It's going great.
All right, that's it for us this week.
The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPolls.com and the Bighorn Company. Your hosts are me, Ian Silveri, and America's dad,
Jason Bay.
who somehow figured out how to engineer and produce this thing. I make the video version. It's been on schedule lately. You're welcome, America. Megan does a ton of shit. The phenomenal Breakmaster Cylinder made our theme song. Get your shots while you still can. It is cold and sick out there. This week's listener feedback comes from one of our favorite former state representatives, Edie Hooten, who texted this review to me personally. Love the interview with Chris Nicholson of RTD. Answered a lot of questions about their status, and that means RTD's status, post-election and agenda. His campaign strategy should be noted by any serious candidate. Love Get More. Always LMAO. Never miss a show. Thank you so much, Representative Hooten. If you leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, a comment on Spotify, a reply to a post on Blue Sky, or even just fucking text us, we might read it on the air, just like Edie Hooten. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate the show and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. If you got more smarter, it actually helps a lot. Find us at getmoresmarter.com, where you can sign up for bonus content in our Substack. Subscribe to our YouTube channel at Get More Smarter, and please send all angry and non-angry rants to angryrants@getmoresmarter.com. Other shit to Ian at getmoresmarter.com, and other shit to Jason at getmoresmarter.com. Thanks to our guest today, Tom Pepinsky, who made us feel simultaneously a lot better and quite a bit worse. And thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Good shit.
Good show.